Stop being obsolete, Wendy. That emergency shower dumps 20 gallons a minute, and we are not paying to rinse the floor for nothing. At 5:42 on Monday, under humming sodium lights and a sky that hadn't decided whether to become dawn, Trent Malloy said it loud enough for the whole sulfuric transfer crew to hear. He stood at utility board 3 with one polished boot on the graded platform, one hand on his radio, the other hand stabbing at the brass-tagged valve map as if the panel were a whiteboard and not the last line between exposure and survival. Wendy Foster felt the sentence land before she answered. 14 years on sulfuric service had taught her to read loads in steel, pressure in pump tone, danger in smell. It had not trained her to absorb public contempt from a manager who had been on site for 11 months and still called any non-production flow waste. She kept her shoulders level anyway. The discipline that kept people alive started with posture. Steam drifted from the condensate trench and curled around her boots. The transfer header vibrated under idling pressure from Tank Farm 2. A low tremor through the handrail, through her gloves, into bone. On the mezzanine above, 2 contractors paused while pulling insulation and looked down. On the bay floor, Luis Pena froze beside the panel cabinet with a clipboard against his chest. Even the forklift 2 lanes over seemed quieter for 1 second, as if the plant itself had leaned in to listen. Malloy gave her that flat management smile that never touched his eyes. You heard me. We are not flooding concrete because you people like old rituals. Wendy looked at the utility line diagram. Then she looked at the actual piping run mounted 3 feet to the right. The shower feed to station C7 was chained in the closed position, lock body fresh, tag blank. The lockout was not in the morning permit packet. She knew because she had signed the packet at 5:11 and written the pre-start checklist code in blue ink herself. He followed her gaze and shrugged. Temporary conservation control. That shower is not conservation equipment, she said. Her voice stayed even. It is emergency response. It is a water bill with a handle. He said it with a little laugh, then turned so the crew could see he was in command. We are behind on noon rail load. I'm not debating this with a technician. A technician. Not lead acid transfer specialist. Not the person who trained half the shift. Not the operator whose signature operations required before sulfuric startup. The demotion was verbal, strategic, and public. Wendy stepped toward the board and pointed at the tiny red lens already lit beside C7 on the status strip. Low flow indicator is active. That means line pressure at the shower manifold is below minimum. You don't have backup deluge at this station. Malloy folded his arms. Paper safety. It is not paper, it is flow. There is a difference. He tilted his head. This is exactly what I mean. Obsolete mindset. We need operators who move product, not people who hide behind procedures. The word obsolete had a way of turning one person into a warning label for everyone else. Wendy could feel the crew calculating their faces, deciding how neutral to look. In plants like Riverbend, humiliation moved faster than any memo. A manager only needed one public target to teach the room the price of resistance. She set her clipboard on the rail and clicked her radio lower so it would stop hissing between channels. My name is Wendy Foster. I am the acid line specialist. I make $96,000 a year because I know where steel fails before it screams. No one spoke. Even Malloy blinked once. She pointed down the line toward the transfer bay, where the 2-inch PTFE-lined flex hose arced from the duplex pump skid into reactor feed. And right now, that hose has whitening at the outer jacket near the second clamp saddle. That is stress whitening from repeated bending under load. We stop, inspect, and replace if needed. Malloy gave a short, hard laugh. You hear this? We're now stopping for color analysis. Luis shifted his weight. He was 24, 4 months into plant service, smart, eager, and not yet fluent in the politics of saying no. Wendy had trained him on lockout verification 2 Fridays ago. He looked at her, then at Malloy, then at the floor. Wendy continued anyway because procedure did not care who approved it. Concentrated sulfuric is transferring at 180 pounds per square inch in this line. If that liner opens under vibration, atomization risk goes up. If atomized acid contacts skin, shower response must start in under 10 seconds. Neutralizer does not remove heat load. Water deluge does. Malloy stepped off the platform and closed distance until he stood less than a foot away. His cologne cut through the sharp mineral tang of the bay. Do you know why people call you lazy, Wendy? Because every week there's some reason you can't start on time. Her jaw tightened. She kept her hands at her sides. Who calls me lazy? He lifted his brows, as if her question proved his point. People who carry production when you hide behind a manual. Across the bay, someone dropped a wrench, and the ring against concrete echoed longer than it should have. Wendy did not look away from Malloy. Manuals are written in injuries. That is why we follow them. He turned half toward the crew and raised his voice. No, manuals are written by consultants who never pulled a shift in August heat. We are not shutting a transfer line because someone feels nervous about a shower. Then he faced her fully and let the next word fall with deliberate contempt. Coward. The insult was so plain, it almost felt dated, something from a bad training video. But there it was, live, in front of 9 workers and 2 contractors and a control room camera that captured no audio, only posture. Wendy felt heat rise up her neck. Not fear, not shame exactly, but the specific burn that came when competence was recast as weakness. She breathed once and answered in a flat, clear tone. Cowardice is pretending exposure kinetics care about your schedule. Malloy smiled with his mouth only. You keep talking like that, you'll be talking to HR by breakfast. Then we can all go together, she said, because the shower valve is chained closed without permit, and C7 is red. For the first time, his expression shifted from mockery to irritation. She had moved the argument from personality to recordability. He tapped his radio and called, Control, verify C7 status. Static. Then a tired voice from the board operator came through. C7 reading low flow, yes. Logged at 5:33. Malloy pressed transmit harder than needed. Clear that nuisance alarm. Cannot clear without pressure recovery. He lowered the radio slowly and looked at Wendy as if she had engineered the electronics personally to embarrass him. You people love alarms. Wendy picked up her clipboard and flipped to the pre-start page. Box 16 read, Emergency shower operable. Verified flow. It was blank. Her pen hovered above it, then moved to the right margin. She wrote in block print, C7 low flow / feed valve. Chained closed / startup hold. She signed and dated it. Malloy watched the pen move. Don't do that. She did not stop writing. I am documenting actual conditions. He stepped in and grabbed the bottom of the clipboard. Not a yank, not violence, but an assertion. You are documenting delay. She pulled the clipboard back and clipped it under her arm. Delay is what you call it before an incident. Afterward, it is called evidence. For a beat, he stared at her, breathing through his nose, calculating whether to shout again or pivot. He chose theater. He turned from her and addressed the crew with both palms out, a preacher in a hard hat. Listen up. We are done with fear-based operations. We are not stopping transfer over cosmetic marks and a dry shower nobody uses. Nobody uses. The sentence hit Wendy harder than Coward had. Emergency systems were designed for the day everyone prayed would never arrive. Their value lived in rare use, in being boring until the worst minute. Calling that useless was not ignorance alone. It was moral laziness dressed as efficiency. Nia Caldwell from maintenance spoke from the back, careful and quiet. Trent, if C7's down, we can route to C5 side for temporary coverage, but we'd need barricade and spotter. Malloy snapped. I didn't ask for alternatives. Nia closed her mouth and looked away. Wendy saw the crew absorb that too. Suggestion punished. Silence rewarded. The hierarchy had clarified itself, not by policy, by tone. A diesel pump coughed to life in the neighboring unit. Through the chain-link fence, a flatbed rolled past carrying palletized caustic totes, ratchet straps buzzing at speed. Riverbend was waking up, all steel and deadlines, all countdown and throughput. Monday turnaround always felt like trying to restart a city before sunrise. Malloy pointed at the transfer panel. Luis, prep for line charge. Luis did not move. With respect, sir, Wendy flagged. Malloy cut him off. I gave an order. Luis looked at Wendy again. She gave him one small shake of her head. Not dramatic, just factual. Not yet. Malloy saw it and laughed once, sharp. There it is. Influence campaign. Wendy faced him squarely. This isn't influence, it is mechanism. Concentrated sulfuric from tank farm 2 through the duplex skid, across that flex hose into reactor feed, at 180 pounds per square inch. If the liner crack propagates and we atomize, you need uninterrupted deluge at the nearest station in under 10 seconds. That is not my opinion. That is response standard. He stepped close again and lowered his voice so only she and Luis could hear. You think your years make you untouchable? My years make me responsible. Your years make you resistant. The overhead lights flickered once as the unit load shifted. A relay clicked somewhere behind the panel wall. Wendy heard boots on grating above, radios chirping across 3 channels. The rhythmic clank of a valve wrenched down at Bay 1. The whole plant kept moving while this small fight decided which rules were real today. Malloy straightened and raised his voice for the whole crew. Last time. Do your job or get off the site. Wendy met his stare. Her pulse was steady now. Insult burned down to hard clarity. My job is to stop unsafe startup. He smiled again, colder this time. Then maybe your job changed. At 5:49, 7 minutes after the first insult, she understood the confrontation was no longer about one chained valve. It was about whether expertise still had authority when bonus pressure entered the room. She looked at the red C7 indicator, then at the whitening on the hose jacket, then at Trent Malloy's clean gloves and immaculate hard hat in a bay that smelled like acid and hot metal. He thought hierarchy could overwrite thresholds. Reality was already waiting its turn. Reality was already waiting its turn, and Wendy treated that sentence as an instruction, not a metaphor. She unhooked her flashlight from her vest, switched it on, and stepped off the graded platform toward the transfer bay, while the pump idled in standby hum behind her. Nobody touches the panel. she said without raising her voice. Luis, hands off, start permissive. Nia, with me. The 2-inch flex hose hung in a shallow arc between the duplex skid discharge and the reactor feed spool. And in the sodium light, the whitening she had flagged from 10 feet away looked worse up close. A chalked crescent around the outer jacket near the second clamp saddle, with faint spiral lines telegraphing the braid pattern beneath. She crouched, set the flashlight beam at a low angle, and let the light rake across the surface. Stress marks reflected differently than dust. Dust went matte. Strain went pearled and bright. At 5:50, she called control on channel 2. Board, this is Foster at Sulfuric Transfer Bay. I need live values on P2A discharge pressure, suction stabilization, and vibration trend from the last 6 hours. Static cracked. Then the board operator came back. Copy, Foster. Current discharge 178 psi, suction steady. Vibration trend on P2A averaged 9.6 millimeters per second overnight. Peak 10.1 at 0438. Wendy closed her eyes for half a breath and opened them again on the hose for rule. 9.6 was already outside comfort range for a line with a reduced bend radius. 10.1 under thermal cycling was a warning in plain numbers. Log that in operations note, she said. Tag as pre-start concern. She heard keys clicking through the radio carrier before the channel dropped. Nia knelt beside her with a mirror wand and angled it under the hose where the saddle bracket hid the lower quadrant. You need to see this, Nia said. Wendy shifted, looked into the mirror, and caught the detail that changed suspicion into mechanism. The braid at the ferrule's shoulder had started to birdcage, tiny wire strands, lifting where compression and vibration had worked against each other. Not fully broken, not burst, but opening the geometry that kept the liner supported. Wendy touched the bracket, then the hose, then measured the arc by eye against the painted reference marks on the skid frame. Installed bend is around 9 inches, she said. Spec minimum is 16 for this assembly. Nia nodded once. Skid alignment drifted after Saturday gasket swap. They forced the hose back into place. She stood, turned to Luis, and pointed to the yellow binder clipped beside the panel cabinet. Grab a manufacturer sheet for FH2B, page with bend radius and impulse rating. Luis moved quickly, flipping pages with gloved fingers, and held the sheet where she could see it. Wendy read the printed line aloud so the crew heard it as a shared fact, not a private opinion. 2-inch PTFE-lined stainless braided hose, sulfuric service, rated 200 pounds per square inch at ambient, D-rate with temperature, minimum dynamic bend radius 16 inches. Inspection reject criteria includes jacket whitening, braid deformation, ferrule creep. She tapped ferrule creep with one finger. This is what we have starting. Deformation plus creep signature. Luis swallowed and looked back at the hose. Could it run one short batch? Wendy answered without turning from the line. It can run right up to the second it can't, and there is no warning horn for the exact second. The transfer header gave a low metallic tick as temperature equalized from traced sections upstream. Wendy followed the sound to the support stanchion and laid her palm on the pipe. Vibrations transmitted like a live cable, stronger near the skid and damped toward the reactor tie-in, exactly where a compromised flex section would absorb the mismatch. She keyed her radio again. Control, give me line temperature from TT2A at skid discharge and TT2C at reactor entry. The answer came in a slower voice this time, as if the board operator had stopped pretending this was routine. TT2A is 58 Celsius. T2C is 46 and climbing. Wendy ran the numbers in her head. A 12-degree gradient across a stressed bend during startup ramp was enough to drive differential movement at the ferrule interface. Copy, she said. Document thermal differential at startup hold. Then she walked directly to shower station C7, the one Malloy had called a water bill with a handle. The green paint on the stanchion was scuffed from years of boot traffic. The chain was bright and new against old steel, wrapped through the feed valve handwheel with a brass lock whose key number wasn't on any posted permit list. Wendy lifted the shower pull rod and held it for a full 5 count. The mechanism clanked overhead, dry and hollow. No rush, no spray, no pressure thumped through the manifold, just a thin drip from one nozzle that fell twice and stopped. Nia watched the nozzles and said, "Dead." Wendy lowered the rod, then raised it again to eliminate chance. Same result. She held up her watch so Louise could see the seconds. "Exposure standard is deluge inside 10 seconds, she said. We are at 0 flow after 10, 0 after 20, 0 after 30. She documented it on her intrinsically safe tablet with timestamp, station tag, and visual of the locked valve. She took a close photo of the lock body, then a wide photo showing the entire station and feed line to prevent arguments about context later. "Luis, read me lock serial." He leaned in and read the engraved digits. She entered each one and attached the photo set to pre-start checklist item 16. "Add witness names," she said. "You and Nia." Luis hesitated a beat, then nodded. "Yes, ma'am." There was fear in the way he said it, but there was also relief. Facts let younger operators stand upright when politics bent everything else. A faint, sharp smell drifted through the bay, metallic and dry, the kind sulfuric gave off when tiny droplets found warm surfaces. Wendy turned toward the pump skid and saw a light haze near the discharge flange under the work light, not visible from the platform, only from waist height with the beam cutting sideways. She took a strip of acid indicator paper from her pocket kit, clipped it to a fiberglass rod, and passed it through the haze for 1 second. The strip shifted fast to deep red. "We have micromist," she said. "Not a visible spray, but enough to acidify air at breathing level near the flange and hose throat." Nia stepped back half a pace on instinct. Wendy did not blame her. Micromist was the deceptive state. No dramatic leak, no immediate panic, just corrosive exposure accumulating while everyone told themselves it was fine. At 5:57, she radioed industrial hygiene. "IH, this is Foster in sulfuric transfer, requesting immediate air check at Bay C for acid mist confirmation. Possible pre-start seep at FH2B interface." The hygienist on duty, Carla from day shift crossover, answered with clipped clarity. "Copy, en route with Draeger tubes and handheld." Wendy said, "Bring spare face shields for standby crew." Carla acknowledged and disconnected. External contact logged. Wendy added that call to the tablet notes with exact time, because unlogged calls turned into denied memory by afternoon. She ran her flashlight along the floor coating beneath the hose run. Near the anchor bolts, the epoxy had gone dull in an irregular fan no wider than a pallet, and 2 rust freckles had appeared on concrete expansion joints where they had been clean on Friday. She crouched and touched the floor with a gloved finger. The glove came up with a tacky residue that smoked faintly when a drop of rinse water from her bottle hit it. Exotherm. Not violent, just immediate heat. "This isn't from today," she said. We've had intermittent seep under warm conditions, Nia answered. Weekend overnight likely. Nobody reported a leak. Wendy looked at the dull floor again. People don't report what they can't see. They smell it, they wave it off. Then it becomes normal. Carla arrived 2 minutes later with tubes, meter, and a hard case banging against her leg. Wendy walked her through the sequence in less than 20 seconds. Dead shower, locked valve, whitening and braid deformation at hose, probable mist at discharge throat. Carla sampled at chest height, then at face height near the panel station where Luis would stand on startup. The first tube darkened past threshold. The second did the same. Acid aerosol present above internal action level, Carla said. Not emergency concentration, but above start condition. Wendy held out her tablet. Please sign that statement on this log line. Carla signed with stylus and added meter serial and calibration time. The entry sat in black text under Wendy's photos like a rivet driven into steel. The crew had gone quiet in a different way now. This was no longer a debate about personality or pace. The system itself was speaking. Red indicator, dead shower, out-of-spec bend, rising vibration, measurable mist. Wendy stepped back to give everyone a clear line of sight and pointed in sequence so nobody missed the chain. Look at C7 low flow on the board. Look at the chain on the feed valve. Look at whitening on H2B near the saddle. Look at braid lift at the ferrule shoulder. Look at action level mist from Carla's tubes. This is one mechanism with 5 confirmations. Luis stared at the hose and asked very quietly, If we ramp slow? Wendy shook her head. Slow ramp extends time in unstable vibration band. You don't heal a cracked lining with patience. From the mezzanine, one of the contractors leaned over the rail and called down, You want us clear of this zone? Wendy answered immediately. Yes. Hot side barricade 10 meters from Jose's center line until replacement and retest. They moved without argument, dragging caution stanchions and chain tape into place. She appreciated that. Compliance from people outside chain of command often came faster than from management inside it. She marked the barricade footprint on her tablet diagram and snapped one more wide-angle photo, including posted warning placard and station tag, because later someone would claim the zone was never established. Evidence prevented selective memory. At 6:03, the morning light finally broke over Tank Farm 2 and turned the steel stacks a flat gray blue. Wendy stood between the dead shower and the stressed hose with her radio clipped high and her checklist open, hearing the plant's layered soundtrack, steam traps clicking, forklifts reversing, a compressor loading in the distance, and felt the old, familiar divide sharpen inside her, the line between operations that respected thresholds and operations that gambled with them. She signed the addendum beneath Item 16 and Item 21, attaching photos, measurements, and witness signatures in one packet. Then she spoke clearly enough for every person in the bay to hear and for the nearest camera to capture her posture, if not her words. Hazard is verified. This transfer system is not in a safe start condition. Then you can stand down and let someone who wants to work run it, Malloy said, loud enough to carry past the barricade chain and up to the mezzanine. He stepped into the marked zone line without looking at Carla's meter, without looking at the red C7 status light, and jabbed a finger at the transfer panel as if the machine would accept authority in place of conditions. We are starting in 6 minutes. Wendy did not move from where she stood between shower station C7 and the stressed hose. She held the checklist tablet flat against her forearm so the screen stayed visible to witnesses and camera. "No," she said. It was one syllable, level and clean. And in the silence after it, the plant noise seemed to separate into layers. A steam trap snapping open, fork tines clattering 2 bays over, the constant electric hum from the panel cabinet. Start permissive is denied. Mechanism is documented. Emergency deluge is non-functional, and FH2B is outside service criteria. Malloy gave a short laugh and turned to the crew, performing patience. Listen to this language. Non-functional, service criteria. We are moving acid, not launching satellites. He spun back to her and pointed at the hose. That line held all weekend. Wendy answered in the same measured cadence, because the mechanism had to stay clearer than his volume. It held intermittent flow at lower duty cycle with unknown seep. Today you are demanding catch-up throughput at full transfer pressure. The failure mode changes, she pointed one marker at a time, as if reading a lockout drill. We have 9 to 10 millimeters per second vibration trend. We have a 12-degree thermal differential across the flex span. We have a forced bend below minimum radius. We have ferrule creep and braid lift. We have aerosol above internal action level. Those are not opinions. Those are inputs. He stepped closer and lowered his voice, trying for control through intimacy. You are dramatizing ordinary wear. She met his stare. Ordinary wear does not birdcage braid. Ordinary wear does not put acid aerosol at operator face height. Ordinary wear does not require a chained shower valve to hide the risk. For a second he looked at the brass lock on C7, then away, and she saw the calculation behind his eyes. If he conceded the lock, he conceded intent. If he denied it, the photos would corner him later. He chose denial. That lock is temporary utility management, authorized. Show the permit number, Wendy said. He did not answer. Carla shifted her hard case and spoke from just behind Wendy's left shoulder. For record, IH does not clear startup with active aerosol above action level and no nearby deluge response. Her tone stayed clinical, but it landed like a hammer. Malloy snapped his head toward her. I didn't ask IH for a decision. Carla did not flinch. You got one anyway. By 6:07, the gray-blue dawn had reached the pipe rack, and the sodium lamps clicked off in staggered rows, leaving the bay harsher under white overheads. Wendy used the light change to capture one more photo of the lock and the indicator panel in the same frame, then uploaded the packet to the plant's incident prevention drive under pre-start hold. She hit send and watched the progress wheel complete. No one could claim the file stayed local. Malloy saw the upload notification flash on Luis's repeater screen and his jaw tightened. Who did you send that to? Operations distribution list, Wendy said. PSM coordinator, maintenance lead, IH record, and shift superintendent. You are escalating over my head on active shift. I am documenting a stop work hazard under policy you signed in orientation. His expression hardened. Policy does not run this unit. I do. She nodded once. That is exactly the problem. The words landed with a visible ripple through the crew. Nia looked down at her gloves. Luis stared at the panel lights, like he could will them into a different pattern. 2 contractors on the mezzanine stopped pretending to adjust chain tape and watched openly now. This was no longer technical debate alone. It was the moment hierarchy tested whether procedure had force when it cost money. Malloy reached for Wendy's tablet. She angled it away, keeping both hands steady and elbows in. Not aggressive, just protective of record. Do not touch my log, she said. He held his hand out for a beat, then dropped it. You think this file protects you? It protects everyone if people read it. He smiled thinly. No, it gives me evidence that you refused a direct production order. Wendy turned slightly so Louise could hear every word. I refused an unsafe startup order. Direct or indirect doesn't matter. Physics doesn't carry your title block into the failure analysis. Malloy's voice climbed. There is no failure. There is a delay caused by one operator who likes to feel important. Wendy pointed at the shower handle and then at the dry nozzles above it. Run the transfer and tell me where Louise goes when splash or mist hits. C7 is dead. C5 is 38 meters away around a pipe chase and a graded turn. At sprint speed in PPE, that is too long under active exposure. She tapped the hose with the back of her glove, gentle, no force. If this split opens under pressure, atomization cone crosses panel position in under 2 seconds. He does not have 2 seconds to debate your budget. Louise finally spoke, voice unsteady but audible. Sir, if we swap hose and reopen shower, we can still hit some volume by afternoon. Malloy rounded on him immediately. You taking operations from her now too? Louise froze. Malloy stepped in until the younger man's back touched the cabinet. You are on probationary year. Your job is to run assigned sequence. Wendy moved 1 pace sideways, enough to break the direct line of intimidation, without touching either of them. Do not corner him for asking a safe question. Malloy laughed without humor. You giving me conduct notes now? I am giving you one last technical warning, she said. Startup with this configuration creates a foreseeable exposure event. The chain on C7 turns a manageable leak into a casualty scenario. Remove the lock, replace FH2B, retest flow, then we start. He stared at her as if he could outweight the sentence into surrender. Wendy held the stare. Inside, she felt the old conflict she never admitted out loud. The cost of resistance was always immediate and personal, while the cost of compliance might arrive later and hurt someone else. She had learned over 14 years that the moral injury of signing a bad start stayed longer than any suspension letter. Her pulse beat steady in her ears anyway. She was not calm by personality. She was calm by practice. Malloy tapped his radio and called control. Disregard foster hold. Prepare remote start authorization for P2A on my command. Static hissed. The board operator answered carefully. Need dual sign-off for override on active safety hold? Malloy pressed transmit harder. Then log management authority. I am the override. Wendy keyed her own radio on the same channel. Control, this is Foster. I am invoking formal stop work under PSM Section 9.4 for impaired emergency response and degraded transfer integrity. Do not issue remote start token. A pause followed long enough to hear a forklift reverse alarm sweep twice in the distance. Then the board operator said, copy both, holding token pending superintendent. Malloy lowered his radio with deliberate slowness. You just made this disciplinary, Wendy answered. You made it disciplinary when you chained a life safety valve. He stepped back, then clapped once, sharp as if ending a meeting. Fine. Here's your mechanism, Wendy. Do your job or lose it. At 6:12, the shift superintendent, Daryl Kincaid, arrived at a brisk walk with a yellow folder tucked under his arm and safety glasses fogging at the edges. He was older, usually careful, and this morning already carrying 3 crises in his shoulders. What is this? he asked, looking from the barricade to the idle pump to Malloy's face. Malloy answered first. Operator refusal. We're hemorrhaging schedule. Wendy answered over him. Not louder, just faster and precise. C7 emergency shower feed is chained closed, low flow confirmed, zero deluge on test. FH2, B hose shows stress whitening, ferrule creep, braid lift, and out-of-spec bend radius. IH confirmed aerosol above action level. I issued stop work. Darrell held out his hand. Send me the file. Wendy forwarded it. His phone buzzed almost instantly. He scanned the first images, paused at the lock photo, then at Carla's signed reading. His jaw shifted. Trent, why's that valve locked? Malloy spread his hands. Temporary utility control. We are in water overrun this quarter. Darrell looked up sharply. Emergency shower is not a utility trim point. It was temporary. It was unauthorized. For one brief second, Wendy thought the mechanism had won. Then Malloy pivoted to the number he knew would hit. If this transfer misses noon rail, we eat penalties on 3 outbound contracts and lose quarter tonnage target. Corporate already called me at 5:20. Darrell pinched the bridge of his nose. The folder under his arm slipped and he caught it. Can maintenance change the hose fast? Nia answered from behind the barricade. Best case 2 hours if stores has correct assembly, plus hydro and leak check. Malloy cut in. 2 hours becomes 6 with paperwork. We can run 1 controlled batch now and change at midday. Wendy felt the decision point harden in the air. She spoke directly to Darrell, every word clipped to mechanism. 1 batch at full pressure through a compromised flex with no functional nearest shower is not controlled. It is exposure deferred by luck. If you want legal language, foreseeable harm, ignored safeguards, documented warning. Darrell looked at her, then at Malloy, then at the board light strip where C7 still burned red. I can't clear this as is, he said quietly. Malloy's face changed from anger to cold contempt. Then clear the unit of the problem. She's refusing command under active production emergency. Darrell hesitated. Malloy pressed the opening. You want tonnage or lectures? Darrell exhaled through his nose and made the choice Wendy had dreaded since 542. The bureaucratic compromise that pretended neutrality while siding with pressure. Wendy, step off panel authority pending review. Surrender startup card to me for this shift. Luis looked at her, stricken. Nia swore under her breath, a small shocked sound. Carla closed her hard case with a click that sounded final. Wendy unclipped her startup card from her vest and held it out, but she did not release it yet. For record, she said to Darrell, you are removing designated specialist after formal stop work on documented hazard. Darrell's eyes flicked to Malloy. For record, I am reassigning duties to maintain operations while review proceeds. Name the replacement, Wendy said. Malloy answered before Darrell could. Luis Pena. Luis went pale. Sir, Congratulations, Malloy said. You're moving up. Wendy turned to Luis, and her voice softened for the first time all morning, though the words stayed hard. Do not accept without reading the hold file. Malloy barked. He doesn't need your mentorship. Luis stared at the panel and then at Wendy's outstretched card in Darrell's hand. He was caught where every junior worker eventually got caught. Between the rule book and the paycheck. Between a mentor's warning and a manager's order. If I refuse, he said quietly, not to anyone and to everyone. Am I terminated? Malloy answered at once. If you refuse assigned operations, yes. Daryl did not contradict him. Wendy released the startup card into Daryl's hand. "Then my statement is complete," she said. "I am not authorizing this transfer. I am available for incident interview and technical review." Malloy pointed toward the admin trailers beyond the fence. "You're available in Building D until HR decides if you still work here." 2 security staff, summoned sometime in the last minutes, appeared at the edge of the bay in navy uniforms and hard hats, uncertain but obedient. One of them, Reggie, had shared break room coffee with Wendy for years. He looked embarrassed as he spoke. "Wendy, we have to escort you to admin pending instruction." She nodded once. "Understood." She handed Nia a spare printed copy of her log from the tablet printer folded twice. "Keep this dry. If the system file gets edited, this is the baseline." Nia took it and tucked it inside her coveralls without a word. As Wendy stepped toward the exit lane, Malloy called after her, voice carrying over the machinery like a verdict. "You wanted obsolete? This is what obsolete looks like." She stopped at the yellow line, turned just enough to face him, and answered in a tone almost calm enough to be mistaken for fatigue. "Obsolete is thinking emergency water is optional." Then she walked with security through the gate toward Building D, while behind her, the bay remained poised between warning and command. The red C7 light still burning over a panel now assigned to a younger pair of hands. The gate clanged shut behind Wendy, and the sound sat in her chest, like a latch she could not reach from this side. Reggie walked half a step ahead, not touching her, eyes fixed on the gravel lane between Unit C and the admin trailers. The second guard, Marisol, kept pace on Wendy's right with an apologetic stiffness that made the escort feel worse, not better. No one spoke for 10 seconds. From the bay behind them came the steady, layered noise of a plant trying to pretend routine. Pump motors humming on standby, forklifts chirping, a nitrogen vent rattling in pulses against pipe steel. Wendy stopped once and looked back through the chain link. She could still see the panel lights over Luis's shoulder and the red C7 indicator holding steady. Malloy stood too close to him, one hand braced on the cabinet, posture angled like ownership. Daryl remained inside the barricade, yellow folder tucked under his arm, speaking into his radio with clipped gestures. Nia had moved to the maintenance side of the skid with a wrench still in hand, not turning anything, just watching the hose arc as if waiting for it to confess. Carla had stepped out of the hot sideline and was already logging meter data into her case tablet, head down, procedural to the end. "Keep moving, Wendy," Reggie said quietly. "Please." She nodded and resumed walking. Her boots hit patched asphalt, then the metal threshold of Building D's side door. Inside, fluorescent light flattened everything to washed beige walls, safety posters, a coffee machine humming by a stack of cracked mugs. The contrast made her skin crawl. Out there, conditions decided outcomes. In here, people argued over wording. At 6:16, HR coordinator Jenna Price met them at the hallway corner with a legal pad and a face arranged into neutral concern. "Wendy, this is temporary administrative hold pending shift review," she said. "You can wait in conference too." Wendy answered without slowing. "I need monitored radio access during hold. Active stop work hazard still exists." Jenna blinked. "That's not standard." "Neither is disabling an emergency shower and forcing startup on a compromised sulfuric line." Jenna's jaw tightened. "I'll ask operations." Wendy entered Conference 2 and sat at the far end of a laminate table scarred by years of coffee rings and pen marks. A glass wall looked out toward the yard, with a narrow sight line between two trailers back to Unit C, if she stood and angled right. She did not sit for long. She stood, found the angle, and saw a slice of the transfer bay through steel columns and steam drift. Enough to read motion, not detail. Her work radio crackled at low volume on her belt. No one had asked for it yet. Channel 2 was already alive. Control to Bay C, confirm Startup Authority token recipient, the board operator said. A beat of static, then Malloy's voice. Token goes to Panel C via Luis Pina. Management override logged. Daryl came in over him. Record note, startup under protest from removed specialist. Maintenance follow-up pending. Wendy closed her eyes for one breath and keyed in. Control Foster. Add note that C7 remains no flow, verified at 0 after 30-second pull. Lock serial uploaded in pre-start packet. Malloy cut across instantly. Foster, you are offline. Stay off operational channel. She did not raise her voice. Hazard communication is operational. Daryl's tone came next, strained and formal. Control log both statements. Proceed with caution sequence. Proceed with caution sequence. Wendy stared at the glass until her reflection overlaid the yard beyond. Caution sequence was designed for uncertainty in stable systems. This was not uncertainty. This was known degradation plus removed mitigation. The language itself was a lie people used when they needed to hear themselves as responsible while doing the opposite. Through the glass, she saw movement at Unit C. Two operators rolling a spill cart closer. A spotter taking position near the reactor tie-in. Luis stepping into panel stance with face shield down and gloved left hand hovering over the permissive cluster. Malloy stood shoulder to shoulder with him, pointing at the sequence strip. Wendy keyed her radio again. Luis, verify hot side retreat route and nearest deluge point before enabling run. Silence for a second, then Luis answered, voice thin under the headset. Retreat route is north grading to C5, approximately 38 meters. Run the time in PPE, Wendy said, out loud. He hesitated. About 12 to 14 seconds, moving fast. Longer under exposure, she replied. You know that. Malloy came on, hard and clipped. Enough. Execute startup checklist item 1. Wendy unhooked her radio and set it on speaker on the conference table so every word was captured in open air. Jenna stepped into the doorway and froze when she heard the channel. Luis began reading from habit, the same cadence Wendy had drilled into him during training. Item 1, suction valve open confirmed. Item 2, discharge alignment to reactor feed confirmed. Item 3, header pressure at 12 psi standby. Item 4, emergency response equipment. He stopped. The pause stretched. Malloy said, skip to 5. Luis swallowed audibly. Item 5, pump seal flush nominal. Item 6, vibration monitor active. Item 7, permissive enable on supervisor command. Wendy pressed transmit. Control, note that item 4 was skipped under instruction. The board operator answered at once, voice lower now. Noted. By 6:21, the sky outside had turned from slate to pale steel, and day shift traffic thickened along the yard road. Pickups slowing as drivers looked toward Unit C, where barricade chains still marked an active concern. Wendy watched one truck pause too long, then move on. She could feel institutional dread spreading in real time. not because people loved drama, but because crews recognized the specific body language of a bad decision moving forward with paperwork attached. Daryl's voice cut through. Bay C, this is Superintendent. You are authorized for limited catch-up transfer, reduced duration, full attention on hose behavior and missed. Wendy keyed immediately. Define reduced duration in minutes and pressure cap in PSI. No answer from Daryl. Malloy answered instead. Duration is required. Pressure per normal operating window. There it was. No real limit. Just a softer label. Wendy spoke one final time, each word clean enough for transcript. For record, startup under these conditions has a foreseeable line breach pathway. Thermal shift at ferrule, braid instability, liner propagation, atomized release toward panel position, delayed decon due to disabled C7. This is my final warning. No one responded to that sentence. The channel filled with the tiny sounds of people breathing into microphones they wished were off. At 6:23, Wendy saw Luis's right hand move to the enable key through the narrow window between trailers. Her own pulse synchronized with the action in a way she hated. She did not want to be right. She wanted the key to stop. Panel C, enable, Malloy ordered. Enable set, Luis replied. Prime sequence. Prime sequence active. Wendy could hear the pump before she could see any change. The motor tone rose from idle hum to loaded whine, then settled into a heavier rotational growl that traveled through steel and into air. Her teeth picked up the vibration in the conference room even this far away. Through the glass slit, she saw the hose arc begin to tighten under pressure. Tiny movement at first, then a subtle lateral twitch near the second clamp saddle. Pressure 140, 158, 169, the board operator called. Wendy keyed in, hold at 160 and inspect. Malloy, continue ramp. Pressure 176, 179, 180. The next second slowed and sharpened for Wendy the way high-risk moments always did. She noticed absurd details her brain should have discarded. Jenna's pen rolling off the conference table and tapping the tile floor. The stale smell of burnt coffee in the pot by the wall. A moth trapped between fluorescent diffuser and plastic cover, beating itself against a light. Outside, Luis shifted his stance exactly half a shoe length back from panel edge, an unconscious retreat. Nia stepped sideways for a better view of the ferrule shoulder and lifted her left hand, palm out, signaling stop though no one had asked her. The hose gave a visible shiver. Bay C, report visual, Control said. Luis answered too fast. Minor vibration only. Wendy grabbed the radio, thumb whitening against the transmit bar. That's not minor. I see lateral oscillation from here. Reduce speed now. Malloy again, voice taut with anger and momentum. Maintain, we're stabilizing. At 8 seconds into full ramp, the braid near the ferrule twitched in a tight, unnatural pulse, like a wire spring trying to uncoil under skin. At 12 seconds, a pale line appeared along the hose outer jacket, where the whitening had been, narrow as chalk and twice as straight. At 17 seconds, the line opened. It did not explode at first. It unzipped. A needle-thin jet lanced sideways from the split with a sharp hiss, hit a painted support post, and instantly stripped color down to raw metal in a vertical streak. Then the opening ran 3 inches in less than a breath, the jet broadening into a high-velocity fan that atomized at the edges into white-gray mist. Rupture, rupture at FH2B, Nia shouted over radio and open air at once. Luis jerked back from the panel, hands up, but the fan had already crossed his position. Droplets flashed against his face shield and sleeves. He stumbled left, collided with the cabinet corner, and fell to one knee. "Shower, shower," someone yelled. Workers sprinted to C7. One grabbed the pull rod and yanked hard. The overhead mechanism clanked once, hollow and dead. No water. He yanked again, both hands now, body weight hanging from the handle. Nothing but a metallic rattle and two useless drips from a nozzle already crusting at the tip. In conference 2, Wendy slammed her palm against the glass so hard the pain boomed. "C7 is dead. Get him to C5. Hose reels now. Continuous flush." The radio became a storm of overlapping voices. "Medic to base C. Eyes on Luis. Keep him moving. Kill pump, kill pump." Remote trip not responding. Manual E-stop. Watch the mist cloud. Watch your breathing. At 24 seconds from full ramp, the split propagated past the clamp, and the hose kicked like a live cable, whipping once against the skid frame with a crack that echoed through the yard. The fan widened and struck the floor coating, which began to smoke in thin white strands as acid hit residual rinse water and dust. A second operator near the tie-in caught edge spray on his coveralls and spun away, clawing at his sleeve while a spotter dragged him by the shoulder toward open lane. The pump tone dropped abruptly as someone hit local stop. Pressure decayed in ragged pulses, but the line kept venting from trapped volume, sputtering acid mist in shorter bursts that hissed against steel grating. Alarm horns finally caught up, stuttering into full evacuation tone after a half-second delay that felt criminally long. Wendy was already moving before anyone told her to stay put. She ripped the conference door open, shoved past Jenna's startled protest, and ran down the trailer steps toward Unit C with radio in one hand and gloves half on in the other. Reggie shouted her name behind her, but he followed instead of tackling, because he knew what those first 2 minutes meant. As she reached the fence gate, she saw Luis on his feet again, guided by two workers, face shield streaked and opaque, boots slipping on wet concrete. He was conscious and moving, which mattered. The second exposed worker coughed hard into his respirator while Carla and Nia forced a hose reel stream over his arms and chest in steady sheets, not spray bursts. Good. Continuous flow. Keep flushing. Keep flushing. Wendy hit the gate latch and yelled through the mesh, voice hoarse and commanding at once. "Do not stop water for neutralizer. Water first, full deluge, minimum 15 minutes. Keep contaminated gear on until flush is established." She pointed to the runoff trench where pale smoke curled. "Block that drain to containment basin 2 now. Do not send this to storm line." Daryl appeared in her sight line. Glasses fogged, yellow folder gone. Radio clipped upside down as if he had dressed in an earthquake. He looked at Wendy through the fence with the stunned expression of a man meeting the direct price of a compromise he had named caution. Malloy stood 10 feet behind him, suit sleeves speckled and face drained of color, shouting into a phone that no one on scene had time to answer. A maintenance hand finally cut the chain from C7 feed with a battery grinder, sparks skipping across wet concrete. The valve wheel turned. 3 seconds later, the shower nozzles coughed brown, then cleared into a heavy pounding column that hammered the pad like rain on sheet metal. Too late for first exposure, still necessary for everyone still in zone. Wendy keyed the radio one more time as medics pushed through with stretchers and portable oxygen. "Control, this is Foster. Declare full incident command for corrosive release at Base C. Preserve all logs, camera feeds, and override records from 5:30 onward. No deletions, no edits, no resets. The board operator answered with a shaking voice that still held procedure. "Copy, Foster," Incident Command declared. "Records hold initiated." Behind the fence, under the finally running shower, the water sheet bounced white off helmets and shoulders, while acid-scarred paint smoked on steel nearby, and the red C7 light on the panel went dark only after the damage had already chosen who paid first. The alarm horns kept cycling while the first medic team took command of the bay, and Wendy felt the shift in authority as clearly as a valve change. Production voices dropped out. Emergency protocol voices took over, short and specific. Decon corridor established. Airway check on patient 2. Keep flushing, do not pause. She moved through the gate when Daryl gave a tight nod and no words, then went straight to Luis because he was upright but disoriented, turning his head as if searching for a fixed point through a shield filmed white by residue and water. "Luis, listen to me," she said, touching his shoulder, only after she saw his gloves were still on. "You're moving to shower C7 now that it's live. Keep eyes closed until medic says open. Don't pull gear off dry." He nodded too quickly. His breathing came ragged through the mask. 2 responders guided him under the deluge column, and the water struck hard enough to drum on his helmet. The second exposed operator, Caleb Dunn from Tie Inside, was already at the hose reel flush with Carla timing on her phone and calling out intervals in 30-second marks. No one was improvising anymore. That was the bitter relief. Once damage happened, everyone suddenly respected procedure. At 9:24, Incident Commander Patel from the site ERT arrived with a red vest, a clipboard sealed in plastic, and the calm tone Wendy had wanted to hear 2 hours earlier. "Unit C under emergency shutdown. No restart authority on this unit until release investigation is complete," he said over RadioNet A. "Operations, isolate energy. Maintenance, verify zero pressure on transfer segment. Environmental sample runoff at Trench and Basin 2. Security, freeze access log and camera retention from 500 forward." He looked at Wendy. "You're Foster?" "Yes." "I have your stop work packet in queue. Stay available for statement. Don't leave site." She almost laughed at the irony of that instruction after being escorted out 40 minutes ago, but she only said, "I'm here." The pump skid hissed in diminishing bursts as trapped volume bled down through controlled drains. A mechanic in acid suit confirmed with an ultrasonic gauge that line pressure had fallen below 10 pounds per square inch, then to 0. Only then did they approach the failed hose. The split ran along the whitening arc exactly where Wendy had pointed before sunrise. A clean propagation line from ferrule's shoulder toward midspan. The braid had opened in a cage pattern. She did not need vindication from steel, but steel gave it anyway. Patel directed evidence preservation like a legal deposition. Photogrid first, no contact, then cap ends, bag hose, label with time and collector initials. Collect lock and chain from C7 feed as separate item. Pull valve position logs from utility board. Save DCS trend for pressure, vibration, and shower flow indicator. Wendy watched each step and checked them against her own mental list. When one technician reached to wipe the ferrule for a clearer serial photo, she stopped him. "No cleaning before chain of custody entry. Surface condition matters." Patel backed her immediately. "Correct. Photograph as found." By 9:31, the medics called preliminary status over CommandNet. 2 severe chemical burn exposures, both conscious and transported after field decon, 1 moderate inhalation case receiving oxygen and bronchodilator on site before transfer for observation. No fatalities. Wendy let that sentence settle in her chest and then forced herself back to work, because the margin between severe and catastrophic had been 1 dead shower valve and a few minutes of luck. She heard someone behind her whisper, "Could have been 6," and nobody contradicted him. At 9:38, environmental lead Serena Cho crouched by the trench with test strips and a handheld meter, then looked up with her jaw set. Runoff pH is below report threshold. Basin 2 captured primary flow, but we have acid etch at joint lines and possible bypass through micro cracks to sump branch. Patel asked, "Reportable off-site risk?" Serena answered, "No off-site migration detected yet, but this is a state notifiable release under permit. We file within 1 hour." Wendy logged that in her notebook. External contact pending, State Environmental Hotline. The hotline call happened at 09:44 on speaker in the command trailer. Serena gave facility ID, unit location, material, estimated volume, containment actions, injury count, and current controls. The state duty officer issued a case number and required written follow-up by end of day with sampling data. Wendy wrote the number down twice, once in her notebook and once on the whiteboard beside OSHA 8-hour report due. No one in the trailer spoke like this was optional anymore. At 9:52, OSHA notification went out through Corporate Safety Council with Patel and Darrell present. Wendy listened from the doorway while counsel used careful language. Corrosive release, employee hospitalization, emergency equipment impairment under review, and she could hear the legal framework tightening around facts that had already been photographed from 6 angles. Malloy was not in the room for either call. He stood outside on his phone, pacing a line into the gravel and repeating, "We are stabilizing operations," to someone who kept asking for numbers he didn't have. Numbers arrived anyway. By 10:05, the first shutdown estimate landed. Full Unit C outage minimum 7 days for decontamination, mechanical replacement, electrical inspection, and compliance clearance. By 11:20, after maintenance opened additional panels and found acid mist intrusion in 2 pH transmitters and 1 junction box, the estimate moved to 12 days. At 13:10, when integrity testing found etch damage on adjacent cable tray supports and scrubber-controlled drift that invalidated emissions logs, planning pushed it again to 19 days. Wendy watched each revision stack on the incident board like a ledger line written by physics. Financial accounting started before lunch because rail contracts did not wait for moral lessons. Logistics reported 3 outbound loads missed by noon, triggering penalty clauses. Procurement flagged emergency replacement costs for hose assemblies, sensors, and coated flooring repair. Finance posted preliminary direct loss at $6.2 million by 1400, with a note in red: incomplete, medical, legal, environmental pending. By the next morning, that figure crossed $10 million. Wendy did not celebrate any of it. She only noticed the cruel arithmetic everyone had ignored at dawn. The saved water argument had already become the largest utility expense on site by 2 orders of magnitude. At 14:27, insurer notification turned from routine to adversarial. The carrier's incident response representative requested immediate copies of pre-start checklists, override authorizations, and emergency equipment inspection records for the previous 30 days. Wendy sat in the records room while compliance staff exported files. When the representative saw the photo of C7's chained feed valve and the time-stamped low-flow indicator history, his tone changed from cooperative to guarded. "Please include all documentation around management direction on that lockout," he said. "Coverage review may involve safeguards bypass exclusions." It was the polite language for a denial pathway opening. The delayed consequence that had started quietly on Tuesday now surfaced in full weight. Instrumentation printed trend graphs showing the 36-hour micro-seep period Wendy had warned about. Rising noise in pH transmitter signals, scrubber data deviations, and maintenance notes about intermittent mist odor, logged but not escalated. Regulators would read that as a known deterioration window before the rupture, not a sudden, unpredictable event. Insurers would read it the same way. In the command trailer, those graphs were labeled Exhibit A and clipped to the front of the preliminary investigation binder. At 15:03, Patel convened a recorded fact-finding round at the edge of Unit C. One witness at a time, no crosstalk. Wendy's turn lasted 22 minutes. She gave times, observations, measurements, names, and exact phrasing she remembered from commands on radio. She identified her own actions without decoration, tested shower, logged zero flow, called IH, issued stop work, transmitted final warning, requested record hold. When Patel asked whether she believed the rupture was preventable, she answered, yes. Replace FH2B, restore C7 deluge, run proper pre-start, and there is no casualty event today. He asked. Confidence level? She said. Operational certainty. Luis gave his statement from Occupational Health by video link at 1611, voice weak but coherent. He confirmed being instructed to skip checklist item 4 and proceed on supervisor command. Caleb confirmed he saw the same. Nia confirmed chain and lock present before startup. Carla confirmed aerosol action level exceedance before startup and signed record entry time. 4 independent accounts, 1 mechanism, no ambiguity. The disciplinary axis shifted before sunset. Corporate operations suspended Malloy's site authority pending investigation and revoked his system credentials at 17:02. Security collected his badge at the admin entrance at 17:19. He argued for 12 minutes in the lobby, not shouting now, just insisting the unit needed decisive management under pressure. The access system did not negotiate with speeches. His badge flashed red twice. Then he left, carrying a phone, a laptop bag, and none of the certainty he had worn at 542. Darrell remained, but his role narrowed to cooperation. He signed the Operation Stand-Down Order for Unit C and issued a site-wide directive at 18:05. No emergency shower or eye wash isolation without dual written authorization from safety and ERT. Lock serial tracking mandatory. Daily flow verification with photo proof during turnaround. Wendy read the directive on the printed board and felt no triumph, only exhaustion edged with anger. Rules people called burdensome at dawn had become non-negotiable by dusk. Purchased at the price of 2 co-workers in burn units. 3 days later, with Unit C still silent and caution tape fading under weather, the hard totals were formalized in the incident brief. 2 severe chemical burn hospitalizations, 1 moderate inhalation injury, 19 days full unit shutdown, $11.8 million, direct operational loss, $3.4 million contract penalties, state environmental enforcement action for reportable release, and OSHA willful citation notice for disabled emergency equipment and overridden stop work controls. The insurer issued a reservation of rights letter citing documented safeguard bypass and unauthorized utility lockout, signaling partial to full coverage denial pending final legal review. Wendy stood in the same bay that afternoon, now stripped, cleaned, and tagged out, with the failed hose section sealed in an evidence crate and the C7 valve rebuilt with tamper-evident hardware. She placed her palm on the new shower pull rod and did a supervised flow test. Water thundered down in less than 2 seconds, cold and relentless, splashing across concrete that still showed pale scars where acid had eaten into old coating. Patel marked the test pass and signed the line beneath hers. When she walked back toward the admin block, Reggie caught up beside her and asked quietly, "You holding up?" She looked once over her shoulder at Unit C, at the red tags, the silent skid, the board where the outage cost kept climbing in black marker. "I'm functional," she said, "and I'm writing everything down." He nodded like that was the only sane answer left. Reggie nodded like that was the only sane answer left, and Wendy's radio vibrated against her vest before either of them took another step. Patel's voice came through Net A, clipped and official. "Foster, report to Command Trailer 2, board review in 10 minutes. Bring your field notebook." She looked at Reggie once. 10 minutes means they already decided the room. He gave a tight half smile. "Then make sure they decided with your notes in front of them." Command Trailer 2 smelled like wet canvas, printer toner, and burnt coffee gone metallic on a warmer plate. Daryl sat at the end of the table with his glasses folded in both hands. Jenna was there with HR files stacked by color tabs. Carla had a sealed case of sampling records. Nia stood instead of sitting, arms crossed, maintenance gloves tucked into her back pocket, like she didn't trust herself to relax. A wall monitor showed still frames from Unit C cameras with timestamps running along the bottom edge. Patel did not waste words. "This is the formal site finding session before state and federal closing conferences. We resolve facts now, or we get resolved by strangers later." He pointed to the first evidence bag on the table. Tag visible through clear plastic. C7 feedlock, serial for L99371. Recovered at 0928, witnessed by ERT and maintenance. Chain was cut under emergency response. Serial matches Foster log from 551. Second bag, FH-2, B hose section, ferrule to midspan. Collected 946. No surface cleaning performed before imaging. Lab microscopy complete. Third, 2 darkened Draeger tubes and a packet of red indicator strips clipped to a photo sheet. IH readings above action level pre-start. Indicator strip from Foster turned red on first pass through visible haze. Patel clicked to the next screen. It showed the line item checklist audio transcript from Luis's panel mic. Item 4. Emergency response equipment. Marked skipped. Malloy instruction overlaid in text. Skip to 5. No one in the trailer spoke for several seconds. The printer in the corner kicked once and spat out a page nobody reached for. Patel finally looked at Daryl. "Did you authorize startup with a known impaired emergency shower?" Daryl's fingers tightened around his glasses. "I reassigned authority under production pressure and allowed management override. Yes." "Did you verify a permit for that lock?" "No." "Did you hear Foster's final warning over radio?" "I did." He stopped there. Wendy watched his jaw work like he wanted to add context and understood context would not carry weight against audio. He looked up at her once, then back down. Nia spoke into the silence. You remember I offered hose replacement at 6:11. Best case 2 hours. You chose run now. Daryl nodded without meeting her eyes. I remember. Carla opened her case and slid a calibration log across the table. For record, my meter was in calibration at 5:55. There will be no argument about instrument integrity. Jenna lifted one of the HR folders. Then, HR action is straightforward. Termination for gross negligence, policy breach and retaliatory reassignment tied to safety refusal. Patel corrected her calmly. Terminated pending legal referral. State investigators requested chain of command records this morning. They get everything. By the second week of October, Wendy had learned the sound of legal consequence. Not alarms, not shouting, just scanners pulling emails into indexed PDFs, while people who had ignored field warnings argued over subject lines and timestamps. At 9 o'clock that Thursday, the state investigator joined by video. At 9:12, OSHA's area director was on the second window, voice flat with practiced patience. They asked for the same items in different language, and Riverbend produced them in sequence. Pre-start checklist with Wendy's handwritten hold, lock photos, low-flow logs, DCS trends, radio transcripts, camera clips, IH results, maintenance notes from the 36-hour SEEP window, and the utility board access history, showing who had badged into the valve corridor before dawn Monday. The access log closed one thread hard. Malloy's badge opened utility board 3 gate at 5:27. No maintenance work order existed for that interval. No conservation permit existed at all. The alarm delay thread closed next. Instrumentation-led Rao presented bench findings from the stuttering horn circuit and failed remote trip command. Acid mist ingress corroded relay contacts in panel C, he said, tapping a magnified photo of pitted terminals. This aligns with the micro-seep period noted Tuesday into Wednesday. The relay click Foster reported Monday morning likely came from degraded contact chatter under load. Wendy felt a grim, cold satisfaction. She had heard that click and logged it as background. Now it had a mechanism and a date. OSHA asked one more direct question. Why was the nearest drench shower non-functional during startup? No one answered for 3 seconds. Then Site Counsel said, unauthorized manual isolation by production management. The state investigator requested that line repeated. Counsel repeated it. The insurer callback landed the same afternoon in a glass conference room with no machinery noise to hide behind. A claims attorney appeared on speakerphone, formal and polite. Based on submitted evidence, we are issuing partial denial under safeguard bypass and unauthorized lockout exclusion. Coverage remains for select remediation elements, not for losses directly attributable to deliberate impairment of emergency response equipment. Finance Director Kim leaned forward. What percentage is denied? The answer came without pause. Projected non-covered exposure currently $9.2 million, subject to final adjustment. Kim closed her notebook softly and said to nobody in particular, he tried to save a water bill. Wendy did not smile. She watched condensation drip down the untouched water glass in front of Daryl and thought about Luis, counting checklist items with his voice shaking. 2 days later, Luis asked to see her in occupational health rehab. Left forearm wrapped, face healing in patches where shield seal had failed at the edge. He sat upright when she entered, then looked down at his hands. I heard the skip order and did it anyway, he said. I keep replaying that 2 seconds. She took the chair across from him. You were cornered under threat. That belongs in the record, too. It still passed through my hands. Yes, she said. Own that part. Learn it once, never repeat it. He nodded, eyes wet but steady. I signed supplemental statement this morning. Full detail, no edits. Good. He looked up then, finally meeting her gaze. You shook your head at me that first time. I should have listened. Wendy leaned back and let the silence settle before she answered. Next time you listen to mechanism, not rank. Nia's loaded silence from the bay, resolved during the reopening readiness walk. She stopped beside the new FH-2B assembly, checked torque marks, then said without looking at Wendy, I didn't speak up hard enough when he shut me down on alternatives. I thought one quiet suggestion was enough. Wendy tightened the last inspection tag and handed Nia the pen. Now you know it isn't. Nia signed. Now I know. Some looks never paid off. With hidden conspiracies, the two mezzanine contractors who watched the early argument never became dramatic witnesses with secret recordings. They gave plain statements. They heard refusal, saw the lock, saw the shower fail, and moved barricades when told. That was all. In a real plant, most truth came that way. Ordinary people saying exactly what they saw. The final disciplinary hearing took place in the training auditorium under fluorescent lights that hummed like insects. Malloy sat at the far table in a plain suit, no hard hat, no finger jabbing now. HR read findings. Safety read policy violations. Patel read casualty and loss totals. State Counsel read the referral notice for workplace safety charges tied to willful safeguard disablement. When offered a response, Malloy said, I made a production decision in a constrained environment. OSHA's representative answered from the back row, You made an exposure decision after explicit warning. That sentence ended the room. His termination became immediate and permanent. Badge deactivated. Severance void under gross negligence clause. Management credential pulled across the corporate network before he reached the parking lot. Wendy's own hearing came right after, shorter and cleaner. HR rescinded suspension, restored full back pay, and issued formal reinstatement as lead safety integration specialist for corrosive services. Jenna slid the letter across and for the first time in weeks, dropped the scripted tone. You were right and we made you prove it at personal cost. That is on this company. Wendy signed acceptance, then added one condition. Daily flow test logs for every emergency shower in acid units, photo verified, dual sign with operations and safety. Patel answered before HR could. Approved. Effective next shift. On reopening day for Unit C, the bay smelled like new coating and wet concrete instead of burnt acid. Evidence threads were all closed on paper and in steel. The failed hose remained in state custody after lab confirmation of liner crack propagation from stress and thermal cycling. The lock and chain were entered as prosecution exhibits. The IH tubes were archived with calibration logs. The red indicator strips were scanned and attached to the final incident packet. External reports were all answered. State case closed with fines paid and corrective actions verified. OSHA citations issued and posted. Insurer denial finalized with line item carve-outs. Union safety complaint resolved with anti-retaliation language added to site policy. At 5:42 on the first Monday after restart clearance, Wendy stood at C7 with Luis, Nia, Carla, Daryl, and Patel in a straight line. No speeches. She pulled the handle. Water hit in under 2 seconds, full column, pounding enough to splash their boots. Patel checked his watch and nodded. Pass. Wendy released the handle and looked at the new tamper-evident seal tag hanging beside the valve wheel. Bright, obvious, impossible to ignore without leaving a signature in broken plastic and camera footage. Physics still did not negotiate, but now policy finally stopped pretending it could. She signed the log, handed the pen to Luis for second sign-off, and said, "Read item 4. He did, voice clear this time. Emergency response equipment operable, verified flow. No one skipped a line.